Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. A very warm welcome to the day 4 of our clinical webinar week. Today we will be discussing the changes that the in vitro diagnostic regulation brings for the clinical laboratories, as well as its implementation. The presentation will be given by Marta Carnielli from TÜV Süd, and I'm Gordon Bosch, your host. Marta will share with us some insights and part of her expertise in the in vitro diagnostic field that she gained at TÜV Süd as an IVD technical officer. And before we jump into the presentation, a few practical details. In the middle, you have the presentation. On the left, an important panel. At the top, some help items in case you get lost. In the middle, a Q&A box, which we really want you to use in order to ask questions to Marta. And at the bottom, a survey, just one question that we would like you to answer at the end of the presentation. Also, be prepared to receive an email that will follow this presentation, which will give you access to more information as well as a possibility to give further feedback. And with this, I hand over to Marta.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining today's presentation on the implementation of IVDR for clinical laboratories. My name is Marta Carnielli, and I work as IVD Technical Officer for TÜV Süd. Today we'll talk about what is a notified body, how does the current regulatory scheme in the European Union works for IVD, what are the major changes brought by Regulation 2017-746, the IVDR, and what does that regulation as defined for laboratory developed tests? What is a notified body? A notified body is an organization, independent, that performs an assessment of the conformity of a manufacturer, quality system, and products with the essential requirements of the relevant directive. Notified bodies are notified by the European Commission based on requirements related to knowledge, experience, impartiality, that are verified by the authority of the country they are based in. So, for example, for TÜV Süd, ZLG verified the requirement at the time of the designation, and then subsequently every year. A notified body needs to have a quality system in place and updated as needed. They need to follow standard and rules set by the designating authority. Their name is published in the official journal, but also in a database maintained by the European Commission. Right now we have 21 notified bodies under the IVDD, 3 under the IVDR. Designation for the IVDR is in progress. How does a notified body verify conformity? By auditing the manufacturer quality management system. This is typically done on site. By assessing technical documentation that the manufacturer prepares to show and demonstrate conformity of their device with the requirements of the directive. This can be done on site or also at the notified premises. Or, last but not least, by testing devices, typically high-risk devices, to verify their performance. TÜV Süd has been a notified body under the IVDD since 2001, supporting all IVD product categories and cooperating with the Paul Ehrlich Institute and the French National Institute of Blood Transfusion for the testing of the high-risk device we just discussed. The IVD team is a team of about 80 experts, though it's growing to get ready for IVDR. Let's look at the current regulatory scheme for IVDs in the EU. The current EU regulatory schemes, in addition to the two directives for medical devices, has a third separate directive for IVDs. That's Directive 98/79. This directive will be replaced by the regulation from the 26th of May 2022. The directive defines an IVD as a medical device to be used for the in vitro examination of a specimen derived from the human body to provide information as, for example, concerning a physiological or pathological state. This definition is very similar in the IVDR. There are some words difference. For example, the IVDR includes software as a possible IVD. Let's now look at what the IVDD says about a laboratory developed test. The IVDD actually clearly excludes devices that are manufactured and used within the same legal entity from its scope. It also specifies that member states can add additional rules specific to these devices. Let's look at the IVDR, the major changes and the transition time. The IVDR is a major change for IVD, not only because it's a regulation, so as soon as it is applicable, it applies across all member states without the need of a transposition into national law as the directive, but also because it introduces really a lot of major changes. The first one is the reclassification of IVDs according to risk. The directive classified the IVDs based on a list. The IVDR introduces a set of rules that allow the manufacturer to classify all the devices, well, oblige the manufacturer to classify their devices according to risk prior placing them on the market. This also applies to laboratory developed tests. The scope is expanded. We saw software is included in the definition, but also lab developed tests are included in the scope. The oversight and the involvement of notified body, we'll see that under the directive is about 15% of the IVDs requiring notified bodies overview. This percentage is going up to 90% under the regulation. Post-market, the monitoring of the performance of the devices once they are on the market is made much more rigorous in the regulation. There are stricter requirements for manufacturer, authorized rep, but also distributor and importers. To improve traceability, there is a gradual implementation of a unique device identification system, and rules already existed for technical documentation and clinical evidence. However, the requirements are made stricter in the regulation. We saw in the previous slides that classification is one of the major changes introduced by the regulation. Of course, IVDs are classified already today, but the system that the regulation introduces is completely different. It's based on a set of rules, which we will see shortly. Is based on Global Harmonization Task Force rules, and it divides IVD in 4 classes based on risk. 2 risk factors should be taken into account. One is the actual risk for the individual being tested. The other is the risk for the public. If we look at Class A, in this class we will find devices that have low risk for the individual and low risk for the public. For example, buffer solutions, analyzers that test different markers. Those devices will be considered Class A. In Class B, we'll find devices that have a moderate risk for the individual and still a low risk for the public. The pregnancy test, for example, would fall in Class B. Class C is a fairly large class. There are a lot of different types of devices. in this class, but they all share a high risk for the individual and a moderate risk for the public. So here we find therapeutic drug monitoring devices, we find companion diagnostics devices, we find devices that are used to detect the exposure to transmissible agents. In class D, that's the highest class, so here the risk is high for both the individual and the public. Typically, here we find the devices used for blood grouping, ABO blood grouping determination, and for the screening of infectious disease of blood or tissue in view of transfusion or transplant. Classification rules to be applied to IVDs are detailed in Annex 8 of the regulation. This annex is divided into chapters, one containing 10 implementing rules, and a second one detailing the actual classification rules. Implementing rules give guidelines on how to apply the classification rules. For example, we see that software that is independent of any other device, it should be classified in its own right, meaning based on the intended purpose of the software, whereas a software that drives a device or influences use, for example, if we are looking at analyzers, they usually would have an embedded software guiding their use. This software will be classified in the same class as the device. So we have 10 implementing rules. Here you can see the first 5 of them. In the next slide we see the implementing rules 6 to 10. So the second set of implementing rules. What these rules say, they give guidance for classification of control materials with assigned value, which these controls should be in the same class as the device they need to verify the performance for. If multiple classification rules should apply, the classification resulting in the higher classification of the device shall be the one that actually determines the classification of the device. To determine a proper classification, all classification and implementation rules should be considered. And if a device has multiple intended purposes, since the intended purpose of the device is what determine the classification, the rule resulting in the higher class should be again applied. For example, if a manufacturer has a syphilis device which has an intended purpose of determining the exposure and the presence of the patient to syphilis. In this case, the device could be considered Class C. But if that same device also has the intended purpose to screen donor for the presence of syphilis in view of the blood donation, then that device could also be Class D. In this case, because the device has multiple intended purposes, the one that gives the highest classification applies, so the syphilis device would be Class D. What you see on this slide is a summary of the 7 classification rules that are present in Annex 8 of the IVDR and how they should be applied. We'll look at each rules in more detail in a moment, but if we now review them all together, how should a manufacturer apply these rules? Based on the device intended purpose, once this is defined for a given device, first rule would be Rule 1. This usually covers devices used to screen blood and to determine high-risk disease that have a high risk of transmission with a high risk of serious consequence for the health of a patient. If the device falls into this category, then it will be automatically classified as class D, highest risk. If the device is not in this category, then the manufacturer should continue with class Rule 2. Rule 2 looks at devices that are used to determine blood or tissue compatibility in view of a donation, and is subsequently distinguished between high-risk groups, like the ABO group, which would be classified as class D, and all other devices for which the classification would be class C. If the device is not covered by any of these two rules, then rule number 3 should be reviewed. This rule covers a wide range of devices used to determine the contamination with infectious diseases, for cancer testing, companion diagnostics, genetic testing, and congenital screening. Those are classified as class C. If the device is not included in this or not covered in this rule, then the manufacturer should continue on to class 4, rule 4. Rule 4 covers device for self-testing and high-risk near-patient test. If the device falls into this class and it's exempted, there is the regulation gives a list of exempted tests, which we'll see in a couple of slides, then the device will be classified as class B. If the device is not in the exempted list, it will be classified as class C. If the device is not covered by rule 4, then the manufacturer should continue on to rule 5. Here we have some IVDs reagent like buffer solution, for example. We have the analyzers used to test various markers. We have the containers, sample containers. Those are considered low risk and will be considered class A. If the device is not covered by this rule, then we should continue on to Rule 6. Rule 6 says essentially if your device is not covered by any of the previous rule, then it should be class B. Or manufacturers have the option to use also Rule 7, which is very specific. It applies to controls without assigned values. Those are also considered class B. If now we look at the classification rules in more details, rule number 1, high-risk device. So it's detection of high-risk disease, highly transmissible with high risk of propagation, and which could be life-threatening. This includes a lot of assays that are already considered high risk, so annexed to list A under the IVDD. Not only, but high risk. For example, we have HIV, HCV, hepatitis B, HTLV. Syphilis is currently not an Annex 2 list, but it could be Class D if it's considered, if the intended purpose is screening in view of a blood donation, for example. If we look at Rule 2, Rule 2 considers blood grouping, fetal-maternal incompatibility, or tissue typing. those devices are class C unless they are high risk. And under the red box you see which devices would be considered high risk and fall in class D. The ABO system, Rhesus, Kell, Kit, and Duffy. Devices that would be considered class C according to these rules are, for example, devices used to determine the MNS status of a patient. Now let's look at rule number 3. Rule number 3 includes class C devices. As a reminder, devices classified as class C have a high risk for the individual and a moderate risk for the public. It's a large class and there are a lot of different type of devices that are included. So let's see which ones are included. First is sexually transmitted agents, for example chlamydia or gonorrhea, infectious agents that don't have a high risk of propagation, otherwise they would be class D, for example Neisseria meningitis. Infectious agents where if the device gives an erroneous result, there is a risk of death or severe disability to the patient or the fetus or the embryo or the offspring. For example, chlamydia, CMV. Prenatal screening of women to determine their immune status, for example, rubella or toxoplasmosis. Infectious diseases where there is a risk that an erroneous result would cause an erroneous patient management decision that is at risk for the patient or the offspring. Companion diagnostics is also included in this rule. Continuing on rule 3, we have software used for disease staging, screening of cancer, diagnosis and staging, genetic testing, therapeutic drug monitoring, patient screening for congenital disorders in embryo or newborn babies, and management of patients, devices for the management of patients that suffer from a life-threatening condition, where again a wrong result would have an impact on the patient management. So a large class, and also a class that is largely impacted by the change from directive to regulation. Why? Because a lot of these are currently classified as general IVDs, self-declare, without the requirement to be reviewed by the notified bodies. Whereas with the regulation, all of these will need a notified body approval prior getting CE marking. We continue on to rule 4. Device for self-testing. They are classified as class C, except, here is the exemption list I was referring to earlier on. If the device is for self-testing but is for the detection of pregnancy, fertility testing to determine cholesterol, glucose, erythrocyte, leukocyte and bacteria in urine, those devices are considered class B. Whereas if a device is for self-testing of glucose in blood, that would be class C, so considered higher risk. Devices that are intended for near-patient testing are classified in their own right, meaning depending on what analyte, what marker they are used for. We continue on to rule 5. This applies to device for general laboratory use. that generally have no critical characteristics. So it could be a buffer solution, a washing solution, or it could be instruments that need to be used for in vitro testing of various assays, or as we saw earlier on, specimen containers. Now continue on to Rule 6. What Rule 6 says, okay, you went through all these previous rules, and the device you're trying to commercialize doesn't fall in any of these categories, then it would be considered Class B. Here again, a lot of these assays are considered today as self-declared assay. We would have examples, physiological markers, but it could be hormone, thyroid hormone, for example, vitamin testing, enzymes, or sodium, potassium, and chloride. There is one last rule, that's Rule 7, and as I was saying, it's very specific to unassigned controls, regardless of whether they are quantitative or qualitative. Those would be considered Class B. Now, the responsibility of classification of a device lies with the manufacturer. However, for a CE marked device, this will determine, the classification will determine whether or not a notified body oversight is required, and also which conformity assessment can be applied. Now, it is possible that once the manufacturer applies to a notified body, the notified body doesn't agree with the manufacturer. So what happens if the two cannot resolve their difference of opinions? The issue is raised to the competent authority of the country where the manufacturer, or if it's a non-European manufacturer, is based, in consultation, if the notified body is based in another member state, in consultation with the competent authority of the notified body member state. So, for example, Irish manufacturer working with TÜV Süd, based in Germany, a dispute in the classification will be raised to the HPRA, and the HPRA will then work with the German authority to resolve this issue. And the competent authority member state then would inform the Commission and the Medical Device Coordination Group of the decision. The IVD regulation was published on the 5th of May 2017 and entered into force a few weeks later on May 26. Recognizing that the regulation brings a lot of new requirements to IVD devices, regulators granted a transition period of 5 years, and the date of application is therefore the 26th of May 2022. In this transition period, manufacturer can place on the market devices under the IVDD or the IVDR. After the 26th of May 2022, placing on the market can occur under the IVDR only, unless the manufacturer has a valid notified body certificate for the device they want to place in the market. In this case, they are allowed 2 additional years till May 2024. In May 2024, the all IVDD certificates become invalid. There is 1 additional year where devices cannot be placed on the market under the IVDD, but they can still be made available or put into service, so given to end users, for example, for one more year, until May 2025. This additional year is sometimes referred to as the warehouse clause. The IVDR has two articles, Article 110 and Article 113, that details the transitional provision. However, this article don't refer to laboratory developed tests, as those tests were never placed on the market under the directive because they were out of scope. So based on what we know today, as of the 26th of May 2022, laboratory developed tests should comply with the requirements of the regulation, which we'll see in a minute. Now, what does the IVDR say with respect to lab? The IVDR defines a health institution as an institution where the primary purpose is to take care of the health of the patient, differentiating it from economic operators, which are manufacturer or importer, based on the commercial aspects of economic operator. It also excludes explicitly from the scope and from the definition of health institution organizations such as wellness centers. The condition under which devices manufactured by health institutions can be still placed on the market after the date of application of the IVDR are explained in paragraph 5 of Article 5 of the IVDR. What this article says is that if the device fulfills a set of criteria, only Annex 1 of the regulation will apply. Let's look at what those criteria are. First of all, the device needs to be manufactured and used within the same legal entity. That legal entity must have a quality management system in place to manufacture and use the device. It needs to be in compliance with ISO 15189, or if it is applicable, with national provision. Important, the health institution needs to be able to justify that there is no CE mark product that fulfills their patient need. When it comes, for example, to analytical performance of the assay or clinical performance, but they'll need to have a justification in place. The health institution needs to be able to provide information on the device itself, how it's manufactured and used to the competent authority if the authority requests it. They need to have a declaration that the general safety and performance requirements of the directive are met. The GSPR is Annex 1 of the directive. This part is the same as for regular CE. Devices manufactured and used within a health institution will have to meet the requirements of Annex 1 of the regulation unless they can justify in writing that they cannot meet them. This is an exception specific to this laboratory developed test because it's not possible for CE mark device not to comply with all the relevant requirements of the same paragraph 5 of Article 5 of the regulation states that for Class D devices, so for the highest risk, there needs to be a documentation in place to document the manufacturing processes and facility, how the device was designed, the performance, etc., as a confirmation of the fact that the GSPR requirements are met. There is also the need to have in place a system to measure, for example, that the manufacturing process is carried out as described in the relevant documentation. There is a requirement for each health institution to review how the device is performed in use. The regulation also leaves the possibility for national authorities to request the same extent of documentation for Class D devices for the other classes of devices. We saw that laboratory developed tests need to fulfill the requirements of Annex 1 or GSPR of the regulation. What are those requirements? In the interest of time, we won't be able to review them in detail, but we can review a high-level summary. The Annex 1 contains 3 chapters. Number 1 is the chapter for general requirements, where we talk about risk management system and the need to demonstrate that the device, when used as the manufacturer says it should be used, is safe and effective. Chapter 2 concerns performance requirements, such as, for example, analytical sensitivity, specificity, precision, the design of the product, and also the manufacturer. So what raw materials are included in the device and how it is manufactured. Chapter 3 concerns the information supplied with the device, so what information needs to be present on the labels and the instruction for use for the user to be able to use the device effectively. Any warning, The IVDR indicates that all devices, including laboratory developed tests, must comply with the requirements listed in Annex 1, the general safety and performance requirements. What it doesn't say is how compliance with those requirements can be documented. One possible way is to use a checklist where each general safety and performance requirement is listed. Whether it's applicable or not to the device is indicated, and if it's not applicable, a rationale is provided. If compliance is achieved using ISO standard, those standards are also referenced in there, along with where the evidence for compliance is and what is. It's important to clearly specify where the evidence can be found in case of the retrieval of that information is required, for example, in case of an inspection. The checklist can be dated, signed, and also identified with a revision number. And now, before I conclude this presentation, I would like to summarize what we reviewed today. We saw that the IVD directive excluded laboratory developed tests from its scope when they were manufactured and used within the same institution. The situation is different with IVDR. The laboratory developed test won't need to fulfill all of the requirements of the IVDR, but they are in the scope and they will need to meet the requirements of Annex 1. Also, the health institution will need to justify why they cannot use a CE marked device. Although the regulation is quite prescriptive, there will be an additional guidance on the implementation of IVDR for laboratory developed tests that will be created by the MDCG. We do not have, however, the exact availability date of this guidance. I would like to thank you for your attention. Thank you, Waters, for giving me the opportunity to speak at this users meeting today, and I'll be happy to take any question you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Marta, for this great presentation. Very insightful, I must say. So thanks again for making the time talking to us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So while you were talking, we received a few questions, so to the audience as well. If you have any questions, please use the chat box on the left in the middle. Type in your question and we'll take it on board. We can. So let's start with the first question we got. So we understand the Commission is working on a classification guidance for IVD. Do you have any update on this?
Yes, the Commission is working on a classification guidance which was expected to be endorsed before the end of April, and then right after that published on the Commission website. Scope of this guidance is really to provide detailed information on how to classify IVDs. With the COVID crisis, all resources were diverted to handling this crisis, and so all other activities have been postponed. So we don't have an exact date for the publication of this classification guidance document. However, we know it was nearly ready to go. So as soon as the COVID crisis calms down, then we expect the guidance document on classification will be published. So probably sometime this summer.
Okay, thank you. So the next one is, do you have an update on the status of EUDAMED?
EUDAMED, as you all know, was supposed to be available in March this year as a complete database. The Commission subsequently announced that they would release this database in two sets of modules, of different modules. The first set in March this year and the second set later on. An announcement was made later, after this announcement. Another announcement was made saying that the whole database will be released, delayed to May 2022, and we are currently working towards that date. It is still possible that the registration module, which is the first module manufacturer will need to use to register all of their devices in, will be made available 1 year from now, so in May 2021. However, that's still to be confirmed. So right now we are working against a May 2022 availability date.
Okay, so so worst case scenario, EUDAMED will be available at the same time as IVDR comes fully implemented.
Yeah.
So the next one is regarding, a similar question in a way. Is IVDR going to be postponed similarly to what happened to MDR?
Good question. So as of today, the answer is no. All the work and the discussion that occurred last month with regards to date of application concerned MDR only. However, there have been voices, namely from MedTech European Trade Association, to requesting to delay IVDR by 1 year, so up until May 2023. However, these have been requested that are not answered yet. So all we know now, the date of application of the IVDR will remain May 2022.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. The next one is about something that I believe you probably covered in your presentation. Will it still be possible to use IVDD compliant devices after May 2025?
Yes, if they are installed at a customer site, it will still be possible to use them until they either expire or need replacement for other reasons. But yes, it will still be possible. But from a manufacturer's perspective, it will not be possible to put new instrument into service.
Excellent.
IVDD instrument.
Yes, that is very good news. The next one, can you provide an update on what information will be made publicly available once EUDAMED is live?
I can provide an update. It won't be a definite answer because the conversation around this point are still ongoing. So one of the need to have EUDAMED and one of the wish was to increase transparency around medical devices and IVD, making more information publicly available. Some of those, the information or documents that will have to be made publicly available are defined in the regulation. For example, the summary of safety and performance that we know it will be publicly available. But a lot of the information concerning the post-market performance of devices is not clearly defined whether or not they should be publicly available via EUDAMED. So what we know for sure is that communication concerning customer communication concerning the field safety corrective action will be made publicly available. This is not a big change compared to today because each European health authority publishes those letters on their own website. The difference will be that they will be all available in a central database in all the various languages. There are discussions to make incident the declarations publicly available. Those so far have been discussion because these reports are very detailed, contain a lot of information, and sometimes it's confidential information, so they cannot just be published as they are. So right now discussions are going on as to whether incidents declaration should be made public and to what extent. And again, there is a work ongoing at Commission level to decide which part can be made available and which cannot.
Okay, and yeah, and I believe that this will probably evolve as well as time passes.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Thank you. So the next one is there are concerns among medical practitioners that some niche products or LDTs used to diagnose rare diseases might disappear due to the IVDR. This might put patients at risk. Can you comment on that?
So the purpose of the IVDR was is definitely not to put patients' life at risk. And there is a recognition that there is a need to have some niche type product, which is also why the IVDR still allows for laboratory developed tests. Although it doesn't exclude them as the IVDD does from its scope. It's known that there is this risk. However, my recommendation to manufacturer and to lab developing their own test would be to start getting ready to comply with IVDR requirements now. Use this transition time to perform a gap assessment, for example, of your current quality management system versus the requirement of the IVDR for the specific type of product in order to ensure you are ready by May 2022.
Okay. Makes a lot of sense. Again, thank you. The next one, can you provide an update on the status of the expert panel required for Class D IVD?
So for Class D IVDs, those that are considered novel IVDs, notified body to be able to release CE marked this type of device will need to consult with a team of experts, which will be or are in the progress, I should say, of being selected by the European Commission. There will be a total, if we consider medical devices, there will be a total of 11 expert panel. One will be dedicated to IVDs. There was a call for experts late last year, beginning of this year. Each panel consists of about 30 members. So I understand enough application and suitable application were received. So the Commission is proceeding with the selection. The next step after the selection is complete, the panelists have been informed of the decision, will also be the creation of kind of working instruction of a way establishing how in practice this expert panel will work with notified bodies. I do expect this will take a little longer, but by mid-late summer, we should have the panel composition and also an explanation of how the relationship between notified bodies and expert panel will work.
Very good, very interesting, especially because the next question is as well related to Class D products. So if we take the example of a PCR kit for COVID-19, it will fall down in Class D in IVDR, right?
Correct, yes. Yes, it's one of those assays, also even routine, inverted comma, routine antibody assays for COVID-19. Right now, those are considered general IVDs, but under the IVDR, they will be considered as high-risk Class D devices.
Okay. Yes?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one comment. Of course, scrutiny on Class D devices, because they are the highest risk, is already high. Most of those are at least A right now. So, but also the new devices becoming Class D under the regulation will be subject to higher scrutiny. In emergency situation like the one we are facing now, manufacturer will have the possibility to request an emergency authorization, temporary, not to the European Commission, but to their national competent authorities. So in the current system, we have the CE marking, which is I would say the routine way to release devices on the European market. If there is an emergency similar to the one we are just going through now with COVID-19, the procedure to make kit available on the market could be to go to the national authority and obtain a temporary national authorization until enough data can be collected to complete the dossier that will be required for Class B.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's very interesting and pragmatic, I would say, especially if the expert panel is not ready yet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. So we have another one here. We are a hospital lab who develop our own methods. Do we need to use IVDR classified reagent kits, even though not fully classified analysis systems are available?
So I'm not sure I fully understand the question. For now, you can continue as you are. If then you would like to continue using the in-house developed kit after May 2022, you would need to ensure you fulfill the requirements of Annex 1 of the IVDR, and also that you can justify why you'd like to use an in-house kit versus a CE marked kit. For example, it could be that you're treating a special set of patients for which there is no equivalent CE marked kit, but you will need to ensure you have you fulfill the requirement of Annex 1 and have a justification as to why you cannot use a CE marked kit or device. Does that answer the question?
I would think so. Yes. Again, I believe we need to be pragmatic. Yeah, so I believe it does. Sorry, I'm thinking myself as well at the same time. By the way, if the person that has asked the question, wants to get further information, please ask maybe a question with more details in the chat box. Yes, so the next one is, it seems that the notified bodies are not able to accredit all MDs in time. Will there be additional delay?
So one issue with notified body has been their availability, because the process to even notified body that are active as to SUD have been accredited under the IVDD and MDD. For the regulation, we had to go through a whole new designation process. So this process involves various steps, which obviously first one is to apply for it, but then prepare all your processes to meet the regulation requirements, and then be audited, need to be audited by the national competent authorities and representative from other European competent authority and from the Commission. There is an initial audit and usually also a follow-up audit, and then the whole documents and dossier gets reviewed, needs to be approved at Commission level, and only after that it can be published. So this is a very lengthy process. For a good reason. It has to be the Commission and the health authority needs to ensure the notified body is compliant with the regulation requirement, but it has caused in very limited number of notified bodies to be available. So compared to what we have for the directive, for example, for the IVDD, we have now 21 notified bodies. For the IVDR, currently there are 3 notified bodies. The situation for medical devices, there are more, but then it's also a larger market. So notified bodies and also the Commission are working on increasing those numbers. There is no expectation that that will impact the date of application of the regulation. It is certainly a recognized challenge.
Okay. Thank you very much. We have reached the limit of time. So I think for everyone, well, I thank you again very much for your help. The questions that we could not answer will get answered. Rest assured. Yeah, again, Marta, really a lot of insights. Thank you very much. To all the audience, thank you for participating. You will receive an email with a link to the presentation as well as some additional information and a possibility for you to give us additional feedback. Thanks again, and well, if you would like, we have a last session tomorrow to follow. So have a great day. Thank you a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.